Well, welcome everyone to what will surely be a thought-provoking conversation with Tony and Bart Campolo on their latest book, Why I Left, Why I Stayed. Beforehand, I hand it over to Mina. I did want to let you know that I'll be monitoring the live chat throughout this interview. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, drop it into the live chat and I'll pass it along to Mina, Tony, and Bart. And we'll try to fit in as many of them as we can, but forgive us if time doesn't allow it. So with that said, Mina, go ahead and take it away, man.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Are you out there in Minnesota, Chicago? Where are you at today,
Just
man?
south of Chicago.
Well, you're at home then, dude. Good. I love your whiteboard there in the back, man. So thanks for putting this all together there. Tony and Bart, how are you guys doing this afternoon?
Well, it's a lovely day in Philadelphia.
I've never heard that before ever, Tony. It's a lovely day in Philadelphia, man. But it's a great town, though. Bart, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. It's all good. We're out here in Los Angeles, so it's I don't know if it's always sunny in Philadelphia.
It's always good. It's always good in Los Angeles, man. Always. So, well, hey guys, thank you guys for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to get straight to the point here into the questions. I feel like I'm somewhat in family counseling with you guys. So because you've written a great book here about why I left and why I stayed. And it's one of those things where I think I told you guys this earlier. I would read it in bed. I would lean to my wife and go, "What do you think about this?" There's so many just rich nuggets here that I would encourage everyone to go out and buy it, first of all. But second of all, thank you guys for just opening up your relationship and sharing it with everyone. So here is the first question: how are you guys doing, relationship-wise?
Bart, you answer first.
I feel good. I mean, my dad and I, from the very beginning of as long as I can remember, my dad has sort of sent a very consistent message to me. And that is, people keep changing and they often forget to tell each other. And I want to be close to you. So I want you to always tell me when you're changing, and I'm going to try to tell you when things are changing for me. And so this conversation about this big change is not unlike a lot of other conversations about other changes that, we've just always had that. I'd rather know you than avoid conflict with you.
Tony?
Well, I think he said it well. We've tried to, in spite of our differences, and we've had many differences over the years, have basically seen ourselves as partners in reaching out to people in need. Even though he's become a secular humanist and I'm still very much a Christian, I think we share a common commitment to helping people who are poor and needy and oppressed. And our conversations have basically been about methodology. How do we do this? It's only more recently that we came to the fact that we disagree on the basic motivation for doing good. And I see my motivation coming out of a personal relationship with Jesus, where your motivation comes from.
Hey, Bart, you say in the book these words, man, as far as I could tell, things he preached about and lined up with the way he lived, your dad, trust me, it wasn't my father who kept me from becoming a Christian sooner. He made following Jesus seem like a noble adventure. You go on to say, and I always knew his faith was sincere. No, my problem was I simply didn't believe in God. Bart, when did you come to that point where you said, hey, I'm not going to believe in God anymore, man?
Well, I mean, what's interesting is that the passage that you just described is on the front side. When I was growing up a little boy, sort of thinking my dad's a great guy and there are all these wonderful people around, the stories of Jesus make no sense to me. And, and when I was in high school, I got and this is you especially. So if there's any group of people that should know this, I got swept along into a youth group. And in that youth group, all of a sudden, there was excitement and energy, and I wanted to fit in, and everybody was following Jesus. And Christianity became very real to me in that setting. And then I spent all this time as a Christian. And in the end, I ended up on the other side with the same thing, where I said, like, My father is not the reason I didn't become a Christian more quickly, and he is certainly not the reason why I left Christianity. You know, like I have so many wonderful Christian friends. They're not the problem for me. It's the story itself that's the problem for me.
When in your life did the story itself become, can you think back to when the story itself became a problem for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, 15 minutes after I accepted Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior, I started to have problems with the story. I mean, Dad knows, like, I've always wrestled with the same issues of Christianity that most Christians wrestle with, that Dad wrestles with. I mean, the difference between him and I is that he's able to come to answers to those questions that enable him to stay in the game. And I'm not able to do that.
Bart, speaking of youth group, you kind of like went right into my next question, man. So thank you. You say this, whether or not you can see it, I sure could. Joel's youth group, I guess he was a friend of yours, was absolutely perfect for me. A huge high octane club for nice teenagers who genuinely enjoyed making things better for other people. I was hooked from day one. And over the next few months, the youth group quickly became the main focus of my life. So here's my question for you, Bart. Is there anything the youth pastors at that time when you were growing up that they could have done differently, maybe, to help you understand the story a little better?
Well, I mean, I think, the fact is that at 15, I entered into Christianity. I became a deeply committed Christian and spent the next 30 years living in inner cities serving Jesus. So I'd say they did pretty good. It isn't that and the thing is, my theology changed many times over those 30 years. I went to college. I learned a lot. I read a lot of books. It isn't that I don't understand Christianity. That, it isn't like you go like, well, Christians often write me emails and they say, but do you know about this verse? Or have you thought about it this way? And I'm thinking, like, believe me, I've thought about it. I've made all those arguments to other people. And so it's not a failure of understanding. It's, faith is this ability to believe. Faith isn't a rational thing. Faith is a God-given ability. That's what the Bible teaches. Yeah. That we're saved by grace through faith, and this not of yourself, lest any man should boast. It is a gift of God. And so, like, I just don't have the gift of being able to believe in God.
Now, Tony, this question is to you, because as parents, I think we all kind of look at our kids and we go, okay, what could I have done? Were there any of those moments, Tony, looking back, that you say to yourself, is there any like guilt that comes out maybe? Is there anything that you go, man, I wish I would have done this better?
Well, I think Bart would agree with me on this, that our family was almost non-existent. We would have it once in a while, but I was on the road a lot. We lived a very hectic life. I wonder, as I look back, if we had consistently gotten the family together for prayer and scripture reading and discussion of what the Bible was saying, if things would have turned out different. That's one of the things that goes through my mind. The second thing is that I got married to pretended to be a Christian, and only later on really had a very personal. She was a Christian. She thought she had a relationship with Jesus, but upon reflection, she didn't. And then when she did have a very, very dramatic, everything changed. She asked herself a very simple question. If I had moved beyond just saying that, propositional statements, and had a vital relationship with the resurrected Jesus, if I was alive in Christ, even as I am now, would this have made a big difference in the life of Bart? Would he be different if I had had that going for me? So I think there are two things that I have to say, I do with regret. I didn't do devotional life very well. And however, Bart went with me to meeting after meeting after meeting where I preached. We talked about Jesus coming and going. It's not as though we didn't discuss, but I think it was a constant discussion about things that we believed in. But to take time out for prayerful meditation and for contemplation, we didn't do much. I regret that. And I regret that Peggy did not come into a personal, transformative relationship with the resurrected Christ until later in her life.
That's deep. Bart, is there anything you want to say to that by any chance? Like when you hear that, what do you think?
Well, I think when a man has passionately followed Jesus for 30 years, sacrificing all kinds of stuff to live and work among the poor for Jesus, preaching sermons and leading people to Christ, and at the age of 45, he loses his faith. I think it's kind of insane for his parents to take responsibility for that, or to feel like if I would have read him more Bible stories when he was a 10-year-old, the fact of the matter is what my parents lived a life in such a way that I entered into a relationship with Jesus Christ, and I followed Jesus for all those years. And so, I just think I think when other people blame them, it's hurtful and crazy. I think when they blame themselves, it's tragic. And so, I really know it's hard to believe for some of you guys that somebody could really be a Christian and really that reading the Bible might actually not help you stay a Christian, but that if you actually read the Bible a lot, it might actually fill you with doubt and cause you to leave the faith. But that happens to a lot of people. And I think that to take personal responsibility, both is self-defeating, but it's theologically inaccurate. It's God's responsibility to put faith in us. And so if you're worried about my lack of faith, don't blame yourself. Pray to God and ask God, why aren't you giving this guy more faith? Because that's God's job.
I got to ask this question though, Bart, and it was in the book a little bit too. When you hear criticism coming from, whether it's Christianity Today, I think there was an op-ed piece in there, or other publications, what do you guys think when you hear the criticism coming from the outside of your family?
About, I think you're referring to sometimes in these publications say, if Tony had been a different kind of a person, this might not have happened. He spent too much time talking about social justice. He should have focused more on just the essentials of the Christian faith. I get those kinds of criticisms. Basically, they hurt. But beyond that, I don't know how to respond to them.
Bart?
Well, I mean, I just did respond.
Go back and listen to my sermons. Go back and listen to what I say. Get old tapes of mine. Very seldom, if ever, do I go through a message without talking about Jesus, who he is, how he affects our lives, why it's essential to surrender to him. I don't know what more I could have done in my preaching to make.
Yeah,
I have my limitations, but I gave it my best shot.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be one thing if at 20, after hearing all these sermons and being raised in that household, I had gone out and become like a drug dealer. Like I went out and became an inner city missionary. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it is absurd. Like at some point, I know it is really difficult for some of these hardcore folks at Christianity Today or wherever to accept. But like at some point, some people look Jesus dead in the eye and go, I'm not buying it.
Well, when you say that, Bart, I want to ask this question. You said, I just don't accept the story. Of course you accept the story. You accept the story of the Good Samaritan. You accept, and as much as you do it unto the least of these, you do it to me, that true spirituality is relating to those who are hungry and naked and sick and impoverished, that what you can't handle, all dimensions of the story, of the story is such that even Thomas Jefferson, who is anything but a theist, said, I don't like the references to the miraculous. And it's the supernatural, it's the miraculous that you can't get a handle on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the part of the story that makes no sense to me anymore, and that I struggle with. And so, I mean, I'm a religious naturalist in the sense of like, I think this life is all that there is. And I'm devoted to it. I think it's worthy of my religious devotion. Just the privilege of being alive, loving relationships, working to make things better for other people. Like, I'm excited about life. And so to the degree that in the gospel, I see that same focus on intentionally pursuing goodness because it's the best way of life, I go like, amen to that. Amen to that, brothers and sisters. I'm with you.
Gotcha. Well, hey guys, I have a co-partner here who's much better than I am. Sabrina Clausman has joined us now. Sabrina, welcome to the group here, and I know you have some questions, so take it away.
Thank you, and I apologize for the issues with the tech issues, but I'm back. So,
well, that's good.
Kind of building off of that, Bart and Tony, I want you both to kind of address this question. Bart, it seemed to me when you were talking about the idea of like a godless goodness, you kind of stated, we don't choose our understanding of right and wrong. They're just absorbed from our environments growing up. So basically, you're not a good person because you have God in your life. You're a good person because you were raised to be a good person. And I don't have that same background. I was, from the age of 3, was raised in a home of violence and sexual abuse. And I absorbed a worldview that if you wanted something from somebody, you took it. And if they didn't want to give it, you forced them to. And yet somewhere along the line, I knew that was wrong still. And I was able to choose a different morality. Now, how is that possible with somebody like me who has lived through 18 years of evil to choose a morality that is good when I did not have that to absorb from? Do you understand that question?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and I'm sorry, first of all, that's just a tough, I mean, that's a sad story to me. And I'm sorry that happened. And maybe I'm overly simplistic when I say that we absorb it. I don't just mean like you absorb it from your family. I mean, you absorb it from the society around you. Mm-hmm. I mean, part of it is in like, some of our instincts are wired into us evolutionarily, like your desire to eat. Nobody taught you to want to eat. Nobody taught you to want to drink. Nobody taught you to want to breathe. In a weird way, as we come to understand people more, nobody taught you to take pleasure in another person's well-being, but you're hardwired to do that. We're a tribal species, and we evolved in such a way that we feel the pain of other people, and that we also feel the joy and happiness of other people that are close to us. And so in a weird way, I would say that your hardwiring overcame the really difficult circumstances that you dealt with. But I also have to think that maybe it was in the Christian community that you bounced into or that you were exposed to, that something inside of you just recognized, hey, this is better than what's happening in my house. Mm-hmm. I'm going to reach out for that. And I think that my guess is that if you had been raised in an Islamic society, in an abusive home, and you would have walked into a mosque and people there would have surrounded you with love and goodness, you would have reached out for that too. You had an instinct to reach out for goodness.
Okay. I think that Bart and I have a strong on the basic nature of human beings. He said so well that his belief is that people are wired for love and goodness, etc. It seems to me that the social scientists and historians that I know are not convinced of that. H. Richard Niebuhr and Reinhold Niebuhr, who believed that in the early part of the 20th century, changed as the wars developed, World War I and World War II. And they began to say after the Holocaust, there's something radically evil that is within the human psyche.
That's there too. You're right.
There's something radically wrong with human beings. This is crucial to my whole way of thinking, because the only way I know to handle the radical side of evil that is inherent, as Bart is about to say, in every human being, is through Jesus. I don't think a sociological, psychological process is going to do away with that to evil that became operative, especially during the Holocaust. Something radically wrong with human beings, and Jesus came into the world to and give us the strength to overcome that radical dimension of our evil. Jesus himself said, when it comes to this sort of thing, you can do nothing without me. Jesus is the remedy to the radical evil that I find inherent in human nature. You see good, I see good too. But I say that evil tends to manifest itself horribly within history, and Jesus is the only way I know to overcome the evil that is inherent in every human being.
Bart?
Before we go any further, Dad's breaking up in my microphone. Is he breaking up for the rest of you, or does he sound fine?
Yes.
He sounded fine for me.
Great. As long as, because I know what he's saying, but I just want to make sure you all could hear him.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a great son, Bart, by the way, man.
Yeah.
Hey, this is live.
And then the thing I would say to you is that I think that you're right, that there's, and any evolutionary scientist would tell you the same, that we're hardwired to cooperate and to compete. Like there's this paradoxical, like in some ways we're hardwired for violence, and in other ways we're hardwired for peace, and these wrestle with us. Now some people say like only Jesus can deal with this and cause us to step into a perfect future where all the badness is taken care of. And I think that, like, from my perspective, you say, well, do you have a way to get rid of all the evil in the world? And I would go like, no, I think things can get better. Things can get much better. But if you said to me, do you believe in a utopian future in which there is no, sort of conflict? I would go like, no, like nature never promises you that.
Well, very interesting. This is live, which is great. And we have questions that are coming in. Jacob, do you mind putting the one question back up there? I know we've had several, but this one here was really good. I want to make sure that we're answering people's questions online here. And I think it kind of went in the form of relationships and how you guys get along. Am I correct about that one? Jacob?
Yeah, essentially a question that I got, not actually on the live chat, but in a text from somebody who's watching, was they were asking, what lessons can you share with us about getting along and staying in relationship with people who disagree so much? And what benefits can we take from that and apply into youth ministry?
Do you want me to take that one?
Bart, do you mind? Yes.
Okay. I think that the most, people say to me, wow, you and your dad somehow have found a way to stay connected. How did you do that? And I would say that the most important thing was when I let my dad know what was happening with me and the change that I had finally like given up the ghost, that there was nothing left of my ability to believe in supernatural God and all of that stuff. My dad, as disappointed and upset as he was, his first reaction wasn't to attack me and to say, you're wrong, and let me show you why you're wrong. His first response was to say, I need to understand more. And so he actually invited me to go on a trip with him. And he said, I just want to ask you questions. I want to talk. But he asked questions seeking to understand where I was coming from, not to undermine it. And I think that when you ask questions that are aimed at trying to show somebody how wrong they are, they get defensive. And sometimes then they attack back and try to show you how wrong you are. And you end up tearing down each other's way of thinking and tearing down each other's reasons for being a good person. And he was like, look, tell me how this works for you. How do you motivate yourself? How do you, and that led me to go, hey, well, okay, like Christianity didn't work for me on this level. How did you work this out? And I think that when two people are really trying to understand each other, there's a lot of possibility and a lot of hope. But I think that when they're trying to attack and undermine each other, it gets ugly pretty fast.
I think that statement that Bart made about questioning, I don't think you can argue somebody back into the faith. I think you have the right to challenge people on questions like, where do you get your sense of ultimate right and wrong?
Yeah, these are good
and
questions.
Listen to what that other person has to say. Don't just say, well, that's ridiculous. where do you get your value system? That's a good question. The other thing I probe Bart on time and time again is the way you come across, and it's having been a preacher, you come across as so certain as to where you are right now, so absolutely sure of yourself. I have a right to probe that and say, hey, wait a minute. When you were a Christian, you had serious times of doubt. Now you're a secularist. Do you doubt your secularity? Aren't there moments in which you say, wait a minute, what if I'm not right? Which you question the that you've established.
Thanks for stealing my question, Tony. So, Bart, are there times that you do doubt your secularism?
You know, I think that it's funny. Sometimes people say, how long have you been an atheist? And I say, oh, I would never use that word. First of all, I don't like it. It's a word that sort of suggests that I'm against people that believe, or that I'm an anti-theist. And obviously I'm not. Like when people are thriving in their faith, I'm like, keep the faith. Like, I don't care if it's true or not. If it's making you a more loving person, keep going with it. And so on the one hand, like, I'm not an anti-theist. The other thing is, I don't want to be defined by what I don't believe. I want to be defined by what I'm committed to. I'm committed to loving relationships. I'm committed to social justice. But the other thing is that atheist makes it sound like I am sure, like I can prove there is no God. And the most anybody who's intelligent would be agnostic. Anybody could say, like, I don't know. And so if you say to me, are you sure that there is no God at work in the world? I would go like, no, I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure. I have no evidence of a God at work in the world. I don't see any indications that there is one, but maybe it's just, I'm not seeing it. And so I'm also agnostic about whether or not Justin Bieber has deposited $10 million in a Swiss bank account with my name on it. I mean, that could have happened. But since I don't have any evidence that it happened, I don't make any decisions based on being a millionaire. And in the same way, like, I don't have any evidence that there is a supernatural force that is at work making the world into this eschatological utopia. And so I just live as though it isn't true. But I'm not sure, and I wouldn't want to prove it. Now, if you say, like, are you confident? I would go like, well, obviously, if I thought there was really a God, I would live differently. Like just as you're probably confident that the Bible is true and that there is a God and that all this stuff comes out in the end. And I go like, there's a great difference between living confidently and being smugly certain. And I hope I'm not smugly certain.
I have this part of what Jesus asked us to do when we become his disciples is to bear witness, to simply share us. The evidence of the supernatural for me, and there's many evidences of that for me, but that's because I'm biased and see them as such. But I think the evidence of the reality of the supernatural is what God, the way he's impacted me, the way he's led me, he's changed. More than that, I worked in Philadelphia much less than Bart did, but I became acquainted with things like Teen Challenge, this somewhat Pentecostal movement in dealing with drug addicts. And I watched Teen Challenge, this Christian ministry, take hold of lives for which there was absolutely no hope. They were beaten down, they were addicted, they were committing atrocious things, rapes and stuff like that. And then they had this encounter with the resurrected Jesus, and they're transformed. I've seen lives transformed. And to me, that is such a miraculous event that I do ascribe the supernatural moving into that person's life and affecting that no sociologist, no psychologist could have anticipated. Case in point, just this little fact. In instance, there's a number of drug rehab programs. All of them register somewhere between a 5 to 12% success rate. Teen Challenge, on the other hand, registers over 80% success rate. And they follow these people in those studies, and they find that they stay off of drugs. That kind of miracle is all the miracle that I need to say God is at work supernaturally in the lives of these people.
Sabrina, do you have a question?
Yeah. So Tony, in the book you quoted T.S. Eliot when you said, "The hollow men for whom the world will end, not with a bang but with a whimper, because they have no hope." And I know that hope is essential to healthy living, and a lot of our students are looking for that. They crave hope, and research has proven over and over again that the nihilist idea of looking at life as not having any hope doesn't lead to any joy or happiness in life. So between you and Bart, how would each of you differently instruct our youth on how to find hope in a world that, how is it that you would instruct them to find hope?
Well, I'll go first and let it answer to this question from the secularist point of view. Is that faith, if you want to reduce it to a definition, comes out to Hebrews, where I read the writings in the book of Hebrew that says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I find that as a Christian and talking with other Christians, as they labor to get rid of racism, sexism, homophobia, militarism, poverty, I can say to the young people at Eastern University where I teach, as we struggle, Paul writes it brilliantly, we do not struggle as those without hope. We know that one day, someday, we will win, that God is at work in the world, and we have this confidence that it will come out. As Billy Graham says, I've read the Bible, I know how the people of God triumph over the forces of darkness. And it's in the context of willing to sacrifice their lives. Why sacrifice your life for something that you have no sense is going to have any meaning or ultimate significance? That becomes the basis for faith.
Interesting. One of the questions that we're getting online is this one. For a student in our youth ministry who is walking down a similar path
wait.
Bart.
Did you actually want me to answer the whole question, or do you just want to move on? Because I'm fine either way.
You know what? Go ahead and answer it for us, Bart, if you don't mind, man.
Well, no, because I get this a lot from young Christians. It's funny. I have a friend who teaches at a Christian high school, and he had all of his students listen to one of my talks and then send me emails last week. So my inbox was filled with questions, and all these kids were saying, if this life is all that there is, then it's meaningless. What's the point? And all of that stuff. And I find myself thinking, actually, if this life is all that there is, it's incredibly precious. If we only have this short period of time, the real question is, how do we make the most of it? And the hope that I have is not that you'll live forever and that like magically you'll have a perfect everything, but rather that this life can be rich and full of meaning, and that you can have loving relationships, and that you can do work that makes a difference in the lives of other people. My dad once said to me, he said, if I believe in heaven and hell, but if there was no heaven and there was no hell, I would still follow Jesus because loving other people the way Jesus teaches is the best way of life. And I really believe that. I really believe that the hope that I offer to kids is not in magical solutions of perfection somewhere else, but that this life can be infinitely richer and fuller if they devote themselves to the highest values.
Let me just say one simple line, and it's this. It's the belief in eternity that convinces me that what I do for God in the here and now has everlasting significance. That's a powerful motivation.
And that used to kill me when I was a teenager, because every time I would get out pornography and masturbate, I felt that it had everlasting significance. And I got to tell you that in some ways, being freed from the everlasting consequences of my behavior has been a real lovely experience.
Well, Jesus does free us from the everlasting consequence of our sins, but he also gives that he will give us everlasting significance to the good things that we do. You had another question. I think we ought to move on to that.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Here's a question from online. For a student in our youth ministry who is walking down similar road as Bart has walked, how do we create a welcome space for them to still feel like they belong and are safe in our ministries? Bart, can you take that one for us?
You know, here's the thing. I, as you might expect, I'm the Humanist chaplain at the University of Southern California. And then I have this podcast that goes out all over the world, right? So I hear from, and it's called Humanize Me, and I hear from all these post-Christians. And so when those people, and the kids at college, many of them have left the faith. And that's one of the things that has driven them out of their churches, where, for instance, like, they love gay people. They're friends with gay people. And when the church is dogmatic about gay people, they go like, I don't feel safe here anymore. You know? And so one of the things is that the youth group has to embrace a form of spirituality that doesn't exclude or doesn't damn people that aren't like us. And so the more interfaith friendly a youth group is, the more likely it will be to keep its Christian kids. But if you make it us, you're either with us or you're them, a lot of kids will go, well, I'm maybe with you, but I have loved ones that are with them, and I don't want to be a part of a club that excludes them. So I think the more inclusive your youth group is of people that don't believe like you do, the more likely you are to keep the people that do believe like you do.
I need to say what in the book that you were talking about, the why I left and why I stayed, I have a section that begins with, I saw it coming. As somebody who's a youth leader, there are signs that somebody is slipping away from the faith. Mm-hmm. Among the signs that I saw was, first, Bart stopped going. Now, I know what he's going to say. I stopped going to church because I stopped believing. And my response is, no, you should stop going to church. And they're two equally legitimate positions. And that what church does for a young person is creates a plausibility structure that denies the supernatural, that says this life is all there is, that has a kind of existentialist, nihilist perspective on reality. And here's the church over here saying, no, we believe something different. We have a countercultural value system. Anybody that doesn't see Christianity as a countercultural system is kind of blind to what's going on in society, because society negates everything that we're about as Christians. We are the countercultural people. And to maintain that countercultural perspective, constant reinforcement from people we do, to renew, to revitalize, to regenerate. If I had to do over again, I'd make sure that Bart went to a church where they recited the Apostles' Creed every Sunday, just to have that over and over again. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord. You cannot maintain those beliefs unless those beliefs are reinforced, revitalized, regenerated in the Middle Ages. Bart has, because the entire society was religious. We live in a post-Christian era.
True.
And at this point, if you're going to be a believer, you have to belong to a group that constantly reinforces that. And so as kids drift, young people will tell you this stuff if you're a youth worker. You know, I still believe in Jesus and I still believe in all the gospel stuff, but I just can't stand church. I don't see any point. Walk away from church. When you walk away from church, you're walking away from the plausibility structure that will keep your faith alive. Secondly,
Let
I
me-
would ask
Dad,
Bart questions
Dad.
about what he was reading. And for a period of time, he seemed to be reading all of these books that would take people away from God. And, books by Dawkins, people like that. And I think that you can't avoid that kind of reading.
Can I cut you off, Dad? Can I cut you off?
You need to balance that off with religious stuff as well.
I know they're running out of time, Dad, so that's why I'm trying to cut you off.
Oh, please.
And I would just add to that, I agree with everything Dad just said. That on some level, here's the thing, is that like if you blew up all the science books in the world, 100 years from now, they would all be rewritten again because the same evidence would lead to the same conclusions. But if you blew up Christianity, it would be very hard for people to reinvent it. It's this very amazing story. It's this kind of too good to be true, amazing thing that still may be true. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is that if you want somebody to stay committed to that worldview, you've got to keep them in a structure that constantly reinforces it. And so ultimately, have a lot of meetings. Get your kids together a lot. If you want to keep them in this faith, you've got to protect them from being in a place where it is torn down. And the rest of the world is a place that will tear it down.
Well, hey, guys, thank you. I could go on forever with this. When we said 45 minutes, I knew it would be a little bit of a problem, and it surely is. Just the last question here is a yes or no. Will you guys write again, do you think, together?
What's that again?
Will you guys write again together? This is a great book here. Do you see yourself doing it again?
We'll see how this book goes before we make an answer to
Well, I hope it goes well. Bart?
No, we will not write again. And it was too hard. Not the getting along part, but I'm a lousy writer. It takes me too long to write anything down.
You're not a bad writer at all, Bart. I disagree with that totally. Well, hey, guys, check out the book.
Everybody's late.
Well, it's a great book, guys. I got it all marked up here and highlighted. I would encourage everyone to go out and get this. Every youth pastor definitely should have a copy of this book on their desk for sure. Thank you guys so much today. This has been good. Sabrina, thank you as well for helping me out on this one. And Jacob, I'm going to turn over back to you, man.
Well, the very last thing I was going to say is that we are going to include a link to pick up Why I Left, Why I Stayed in the blog post recap that's going to go live on the YS blog here in 2 days this week. And so keep an eye out for that and pick it up, and be sure to engage in that sort of conversation with other people in your communities, because I have a feeling it's a book that you want to read in community with other people. So thank you all again for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Thanks.
Blessings.